Hey guys. Hey Druid, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I see a few people are here. Molly, I assume that the family is all well again. I feel like you've had it the last few months. I'm so glad you're here. And Robin and Druid, of course, my darling. So glad you guys are here. Oh no! Molly. Okay, your family needs to knock this crap off. Okay, y'all need to be healthy all at the same time and whatnots. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, my kid this morning goes, I don't know if I'm feeling well. I'm like, oh no, unacceptable. You will not be sick. Yeah, 'tis the season. And take care of yourself, y'all. Drink lots of fluids. Stay away from people. I think that's the best way to stay healthy is stay away from other people. If you have small children in your realm, enclose them in a safe space and don't go near them until it's spring. Yeah. 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 Outpouring of health and happiness to everyone. It's terrible to start the year off with, not feeling well. And I know in past years I've been there. This week has gone to shit for me. I'm so sorry to start this off that way, but how is everybody else's New Year going? We're 4 days in. I still am not thinking of this as 2024 yet. In my head, it will be 2023 till probably like April. But this week, I was doing a thing. I was recording Dr. Dutton for you guys. And it was like the mega Dutton pack. It was like all the stuff. And I was doing it in 2 parts. I got the first part recorded and I was thinking, hey, I probably can get this out by tomorrow. So that I could tell you guys about it. I was going to just put up a little intro animation thing. That was all that I was going to need to add to it. I thought I'm not going to edit it. You guys are used to me just talking out of my butt. So I was going to put it on YouTube and like my secret YouTube for you guys. And I finished this first part and I thought, well, I'll do the second part over the weekend maybe. And damn it if I didn't hit the record button. I talked for 2 hours to nobody and nothing. So, yeah, that was my day this week, and it really sucked. So I'm sorry, you guys. There's going to be a little bit more delay in getting you the Dutton goods, because it's just a matter of taking the time and not having my kid running a blender in the background, because that happened also. So anyway, I promise it is coming. I know I've been promising for a long time, but I swear it's coming. But I have some other things that I've been thinking about for you all, and I think I'd mentioned this probably a few months ago. I think I'd mentioned a communications workshop and the sort of kicking off your creativity in the new year, because I know a few of you said Sojo has taken a little bit of a hit in 2023, and that's unacceptable too. And I don't say that to make you feel bad. That's just we want to start the year off feeling creative and energized. So I thought I would do my creative workshop for you guys. And that's sort of a short thing. It's maybe an hour and a half. So I thought maybe I could do that next week. I don't know if I'll do it on a Monday or Thursday. I might do it on a separate day. And I'll record it and like normal, and it'll be available to you guys. So that's another one. And then I have a couple of I've been going through kind of all of my old files. Honestly, my desk is a wreck. If you could see it, it's horrible, and my online files are 10 times worse. So I was trying to go through and just for the new year, make things look better, just in my computer files and stuff. And I came across some things I totally forgot about. So yeah, I thought those were some things I could pull out, dust off a little bit, and maybe update, because goodness knows I haven't done anything with I haven't facilitated those workshops or given those lectures since long before COVID. So to make sure the world has changed, Molly, I love that. Is that a New Year's resolution? No gift quilts this year. The only quilts that get made are for me. Yeah, I like that. Um, I think 2023 was your year of saying yes, so I'm glad 2024 is your year of saying no. I like that. Um, so resolutions, you guys. Do you have resolutions? Do you do resolutions? Um, Make me feel like a bad person. I don't do resolutions. Once upon a time, I sort of belonged to, sort of the you lost an organ. Exactly. You say yes to everything, you're gonna lose an organ. Um, but yeah, I used to be sort of part of that, like the looking forward to the new year club, and I would pick my word of the year, and I'd start a new journaling practice, or I'd start a new 30 days of this thing, and you start that stuff with a lot of gusto, and by I don't know, January 31st, are there 31 days in January? um, by that point, you're like, I have failed. I can't do this. And so I figure instead of making myself feel like a failure by the end of the month, I just don't do the resolutions, period. But with that said, I do think every month it is helpful to just have your head in a what can I do to improve? And that is something I think I didn't do a great job of in 2023. But looking forward, we've come out of the pandemic. It's endemic now. You still have to be careful. You still have to try and stay healthy. But all of the pressure of the pandemic is gone, y'all. And for now. But I feel like we have a little bit more freedom now, and taking this kind of like 1 month at a time, or even 1 week at a time, is much healthier than having that. Yeah. Hey, Kellen. So you did a list. One says more and the other says less. I like that. That's a good one. So do more of this and less of this. In my case, it would be drink more water, eat less fudge. And yes, diets. Forget about it. I've done a lot of healthy at any size kind of stuff, and I don't do diets either. I worked for a company, like a weight loss company for a while, and did a real number on my head. So yeah, I have a real diets, and the New Year's resolution to lose weight is a real trigger for me. Oh, Robin, you picked a word of the year. Okay. Rejuvenate. Okay. I like that one. Rejuvenate sounds good. Because that's taking care of yourself, right? That's self-care. That I know that's a buzzword, a cliche, but self-care, you have to look out for yourself, because Robin, I know you do a lot of giving, and I think it's really good to focus on yourself, and I think rejuvenate is an excellent word for that. So I will peer pressure you. Robin, have you been rejuvenating? So yeah, I think that's really awesome. So yeah, for my January goals, are to get some recordings for you guys done, and also to work on my stuff. The whole month of December I did, holiday stuff, and this is the way it is for everyone, right? And I kind of picked away at some things that I wanted to work on and I need to work on, because I've mentioned I have a show coming up and have to have that done by March. And so January is all right, there's going to be no more lazy Wednesdays, because Wednesday's kind of the day that I don't have meetings. I don't have a stream scheduled. And so I got in this habit over, probably since October of Wednesdays, if nothing was happening, I'd be I could sleep in. I could watch Three's Company all day, because they do the Three's Company. Was it Sundance or one of the cable channels does on Wednesdays, Three's Company all day. And yeah, that's how I often would spend my Wednesdays. And that's all well and good when the week is really busy and weekends are busy and I'm doing all the things, right? But come the holidays, when not as many things are happening because we're focusing on the holidays, and things were for more influx. Yeah, I was spending some Wednesdays doing utterly nothing, and I did it yesterday. Other than this doomed recording, and that's probably my punishment. I laid on the couch all morning thinking, I need to get up and do some things. I'm going to definitely plug in and do this recording. And finally, when I got myself up, I actually put makeup on, you guys. There's only a few of you that have seen me in makeup. And, yeah, so it was like my punishment. Yeah, you lolled around on the couch all day, so we're going to make you forget. The universe is like, you're going to forget to hit the record button. Karma's a bitch, y'all. So anyway. Yeah, so that's my focus right now, is to kind of get back to it. Jack and Larry at the Regal Beagle. Yeah, so I think that all of us have good things in store for 2024. That is my plan and my intention I'm putting out there for you guys. Oh, a music playlist. That's cool. Is it like a Spotify thing? I know you're very into music, and I know you like a lot of the same music that I like too. So, I wanted to show you guys some things. We have, I'm going to show you the first piece that is done for my show. And this has not seen the light of day. I've taken pictures of it, but I haven't shown it to anyone but my family. And I thought I would show it to you. And it is called Flotsam and Jetsam. It's the Flotsam and Jetsam is the collection of pieces. 70s music. I love 70s music, you know, both the yacht rock and the disco. I'm a sucker for that stuff. So here she is. And you can see there are something that I do with a lot of my work is I work in words. So you can see, like, this is in my handwriting. And I work that stuff in there. So yes, this is the first piece. And the other pieces, so this piece is, I think it's about 16 inches. It's like 12 by 16 inches. And that was the recommendation, like around 16 inches for the big piece, right? Yes, Kellen, they are under, it's like the vinyl. It's like automotive vinyl. And yeah, just buttonhole stitched to pieces of felt. And then the felt pieces, they're all stitched down. And then the whole thing is quilted. So you can see the quilting. And the backing, this backing is polyester double knit, which is one of my favorite things to work with. And I've really been into this neon thing. So there's a lot of neon thread in my stuff right now. So the other pieces, and I think I described this show maybe on my last stream, on a stream at some point. I feel I haven't been like alone with you guys in a while. Jill's been here, and I can't remember what we've talked about. But the show that I'm doing in, I think it opens in April in Indiana, a gallery in Indiana. And it is a friend of mine that has coordinated this stuff. And she has a small gallery, a dollhouse gallery that she does shows. And I have had a solo show in the gallery. And so this large human-sized gallery is doing a gallery of galleries. So I think there's like 12 or 16 of us. We each will have our own little solo gallery, and then we'll have our large pieces of work on the wall at the gallery. So my little gallery has to have pieces that are like little tiny stuff, because it's like literally like a 12 by 12 little box shaped space. So yeah, it's really fun. The tiny the thimble gallery is one. Angelica Kaufman is my friend's gallery. And they're so much fun, and it's like little tiny artwork, and she mostly does shows online, although she also puts these in actual gallery and library spaces. But I've sold some work that way, right? Yes, it will be online. She will. So I know that she is in Illinois, and then this show is actually going to be in Indiana, but I feel like they're like geographically it's close. So she'll definitely be taking tons of pictures. I will, of course, take pictures beforehand. So all this stuff will be online. And I'll let you guys know when I get there. I have the dates, but I can't remember. It's sometime in April. So anyway, I wanted you guys to be the first to see this, other than my family members. And the backing, of course. Bananas! I think we talked the other day about using, novelty prints and stuff, either cutting them so tiny that you can't tell what it is anymore, or using them as backings. So I use them as backings. So what else do I have here? I wanted to show you some stuff with, what is this? What is happening here? Double T, what are you doing? What is going on, dude? You're riding a duck. My friend, all right. You're going to have to get off this duck so I can show the people. Hey, Wonky. Okay. You got a tight grip on this duck, man. All right. You may go off to your room. He is. He gets to do all the silly things that I want to do, but I can't. So I know before Christmas, I had showed you these little ducks that Jill sent me. There's this duck and this duck. And it's really funny. I'm looking at these after the fact. This is often, 2 ducks are often a gift in Korean weddings. And I think it symbolizes, the union of the couple or something. But you'll often see gifts to Korean couples when they get married. They'll get like 2 ducks and of some kind. I've taken some classes from a woman who is Korean, and she made this beautiful bojagi wrapping for these. I think they were carved ducks. That yes, ducks made for life. That is part of it. Yeah. And so that is always in my head. And so when I see 2 ducks together, I'm like, Korean wedding. So I thought that's kind of cute that I have like girl and boy duck, little couple. So yes, your mom had a couple of these larger ducks, Robin. It was a pattern this one would have been made in the 80s. And my mom made this for my dad's father, my grandfather. Your mom had the ducks too. These were so popular in the 80s and probably the late 70s. And because he had gotten, so my grandparents they'd retired. They moved back to where they were from in North Carolina. They had lived in Virginia for a very long time. And my grandfather got himself a hunting dog, and he had plans to go hunting ducks. And, so my mom made this, and it sat on my grandparents' shelf in their living room for, from like 83 until I took it back when they passed away. And that was probably 2016 or 2017. So many, many moons ago. And yes, Molly, this is the Cranston fabrics. My mom had tons of Cranston. These are like 100-year prints. And and he's supposed to be a mallard, I guess. But she tied this ribbon around its neck so you can't see his cute little ring neck. But she made stuffed animals a lot when I was a kid, and she did craft shows and sold her stuffed animals. And she was quilting around the same time, but the stuffed animals were, easier to make and sell at the time. So she did really beautiful work. And even though this was a pattern that she did not draft, it's got all these little details, and I think it's fabulous. So I'd mentioned it the other day, and I wanted to show it off of my wonderful little duck. And I cannot tell you how much I hated this stuff in the 80s. I was like, ew, ducks. But now, I love it so much. So, and obviously Double T does too, because it's just right for him to ride in on. And maybe that's what I'll keep it for. But in all seriousness, when I read Averil Colby the other day, she was talking about the methods used in the flat quilting, which I think we have figured is just quilting 2 pieces of fabric with no batting in between. That's like flat quilting. And then trapunto and corded quilting. So I wanted to show you guys my Provence project, which has corded work in it, and it's not finished yet. I don't have a back on it yet. I actually have a couple of borders to sew on, but I wanted for you guys to see this to kind of get an idea of what that technique looks like. And I think it's pretty similar to what the UK corded quilting would have been like, the French corded sewing. So it's the technique is called boutie, which means stuffed, I think. And so that's this piece here in the middle. And you can see it's a double layer of, this is the back of it. It's a double layer of very sheer fabric. I think it's supposed to be like cotton organdy or organza. I think organza is the stiff stuff. Organdy is the softer, thinner stuff. I did not have that, and I wasn't going to buy stuff for this project, so I just used what I had. And I think this is cotton lawn, which is it's woven a little bit tighter, so it's supposed to be a little bit more difficult to work with. But I really didn't have any problems. And then you sew these little channels. I mean, you can see where the stitching is, and then you use a fairly fat needle, and you thread this cotton thread through, or cotton yarn. And I did not have the boutie yarn. It's sold in the US, but it was really hard to find. It was like kind of small shops sold it, and if I ordered some, I wasn't going to have it in time, whatever. So I got creative, and I used the cotton cord that you make people crochet and knit dishcloths with. And you often see that's, I think Peaches and Cream is one of the names, and Aunt Martha might be the other company that makes it. But it's, a fairly soft cotton thread, cord, yarn, whatever. And I thought, hey, I have some of this. So that's what I used. And I unraveled it for the thinner pieces, and then I doubled it up for the bigger sections. And this is a little bit time consuming. You can see like this little flower in the middle, like that took some time. But you're basically like taking the tip of the needle and opening up the threads, so you've got threads, and you literally are kind of just spreading the threads apart to pull that cord through. It's a little time consuming, but it's really satisfying when you start to see this pattern emerge. And in my case, yes, it was pink. I used a pink thread or yarn. It's supposed to be done with a white yarn, but I started using the pink thinking, well, let me try this. And if it works okay, maybe I'll go buy a thing of the white. And I liked the pink so much. Yeah, I left it that way. So anyway, this is on my list to get done because it's not that big of a piece. It has some more borders of this stripy fabric, and then I have a border of this owl and squirrel fabric. Is it squirrel? No, it's a songbird. I think there's a squirrel in the other pieces of the fabric. Anyway, so just wanted to show that to you guys because I talked about it, and I didn't know if it made sense if you had never seen boutie before. But that's what the corded quilting would have looked like. And I think the way she was describing it, it just would have been done the same way, probably not with a very thin fabric. I think just regular like cotton or linen fabric would have been used in the UK. And, the cording might have been thicker. I'm not sure. But anyway, same technique, basically. So I wanted to show you. I think that's everything that I had for earlier today. Yeah, thanks, Kellen. I thought the contrast was pretty neat. I thought it looked really cool. So let's talk some Averil Colby. I know I read some the other, I guess last time we hung out. And the two chapters are pretty short here, so I think we can get through them both. It's the 16th and the 17th century. And this is where she's getting into the quilted clothes. Let me turn this fan off. She's getting into the quilted clothes here. And, of course, she's still talking about the quilts. So she gets, in Chapter 8, we get to the 18th century. That's a pretty long one with lots of pictures. And I think we've kind of already referenced that chapter a lot. She goes into the 19th century. And then let's see, do we get the 20th century? We do. She's going to do the 20th century, too. And then she has one more chapter at the end, and then we get to those appendices, where she kept talking about, the quilting frames and how the Americans do it and all that stuff, and that is all jam packed in these giant appendices in the back. So we will get to that soon. But for today, let us look at the 16th century. So my guess is we're going to hear a lot about quilted armor because it feels like that is what Averil Colby spent a lot of time on. But I don't want to give her any hassle. I think she's proven to be an interesting lady. She references a lot of the like that old English literature stuff, which I struggle with because I have a really hard time reading those weird words, once you realize it's a word that you recognize, but it's just spelled like absolutely bonkers. So yeah, you guys know to bear with me on that. All right. So as a reminder, we are reading Quilting by Averil Colby. This book was published in 1971. This, I believe, is the second or third book that Averil Colby wrote. So chapter 6, the 16th century. References in writings and other documents provide most of the evidence there is of the importance of quilting during the 16th century. Here and there, however, remainders of the work done within this period are to be found, and together with recorded descriptions and uses, these help to give a more detailed picture than is known for any earlier century. The character of the work seems to have changed during this time also, as trade with countries in the East, which had a native tradition in quilting, brought new life to European domestic work, which until then seems to have been of a rather sober nature. The use of colored thread for the quilting stitches became common. Until then, the only evidence of its use is the brown color which outlines the major patterns in the Sicilian quilt. And remember, the Sicilian quilt is the Tristram quilt, or the Tristan and Isolde quilt. But this is made to appear mouse-colored when compared with the brilliance of the original colors of Indian work. Mouse-colored. Surface embroidery worked on a quilted ground was another attraction, and there is evidence also which suggests that the same trading may have been responsible for introducing work in which the patterns were padded with cord. Until about the end of the 15th century, they appear to have all contained soft wadding or stuffing. So, I mean, this is interesting. We've got corded stuff coming from the East, and I'm sure I mentioned at some point that there is a corded quilting tradition in Korea. So, no idea if that tradition made its way out. But Marie Webster, she was documenting Egyptian stuff. And, Ruth Finley kind of talked about the antiquities of quilting. So, there's my guess is there's lots of cool stuff that came from the East along the Silk Road and the other trade routes. And, maybe the history of that technique or whatever kind of has just gotten integrated into more Western cultures. And we don't even realize where they originated from. Quilts made from silk and satin became more widespread. Up to this time, linen, cotton, and wool had been commonly, but not exclusively used, as being hard-wearing for most purposes, but probably the possession of them was confined to the wealthy. The royal wardrobe was well supplied at any rate, as Catherine Howard was given 23 quilts of sarcenet from it as a mark of favor in May 1540. Catherine Howard being one of the 8 wives of Henry VIII. Was it 8 wives or 6 wives? Oh gosh, I'm terrible with my history. I literally read a book about Henry VIII and his wives, and now I don't remember how many of them. You guys know. How many? 6. Okay. Of course, the research librarian knows the number. But quilted clothing of all kinds was worn throughout the century in England. I think she's more than established that. But this is interesting that Catherine Howard got 23 quilts from the royal wardrobe. I wonder what they looked like. It doesn't, I'm guessing we only have that record. We don't have the actual textiles. The subject of their health then as now was of earnest concern to many people, and quite early in the century, Sir Thomas Eliot, a writer on education and politics and a translator of the classics, wrote also The Castle of Health, published in 1541, wherein he gave symptoms and recommended cures for a long list of complaints. I love those books. Like, here is how you dress and stuff a guinea fowl for your feast, and also here's how you get rid of warts and bunions. And it's all in the same book. So he recommended cures for a long list of complaints, for a number of which he claimed firsthand experience. He set out in the fourth book his own symptoms of a chronic cold, which he had endured for 4 years. Sir Eliot, I think you had something otherwise going on than a cold. Sores in the mouth, toothache, pain and something in the eyes, dullness of hearing, quinces, frettings of the bowels with fires, moistness of breath, grief in the heart, palsies, ache in the muscles and joints. So that's his list of ails. Sir Eliot, I think that we are all having troubles like this at any given time. So for which he had taken advice from diverse physicians to keep my bed warm. Okay. This Old English is so hard to read. He had dosed himself with various preparations also. Then he happened to read the Book of Galen, or Galen. It's Galen, I think. Galen was a doctor in antiquity, I believe. Greek, Roman, I don't know. Only to find that I had been long in error, wherefore first I did throw away my quilted cap and my other close bonnets, and only did lie in a thin coif, which I have ever since used both winter and summer. As he added a light bonnet of velvet to this, it seems unlikely that his head was much cooler, but he declared he was better, having taken various medicines and dietary remedies as well. Syphilis. Everybody had syphilis back then. This poor man. Whether eventually the cure turned out to be worse than the ill effects of wearing his quilted nightcap is not recorded, but he survived the publication of his remedies for only 5 years. And died in 1546 at the age of about 47. Oh, Sir Thomas Eliot, you died of your cures, obviously. And why, man? Why would you throw away your quilted cap? Your quilted cap was probably the thing that was keeping you alive because it was quilted and it was a hat. And we know keeping your head covered is good. Although, this is interesting, and you guys all probably heard this from your mom, your grandmother, whatever. Keep your head covered because you lose all this heat out of your head. Actually not true. You don't lose as much heat through your head as was once believed, although it is good to keep your head covered when you are outside in the cold. So more details are given on the making of quilted nightcaps in another book published in the year following, The Castle of Health. Andrew Bordy, of Physic Doctor, wrote his own opinions on dealing with many aspects of diet, dress, and behavior affecting health in a book with the title, oh Lord. So this book is called Here Followeth a Compendious Regiment, or a Dietary of Health, made in, I'm assuming this is Montpelier, but it is spelled Moutpylior. So this is interesting that, bringing up the fact that we don't like to have, the New Year's resolutions about diet. But this fellow was all about, here's a regiment for your diet. So he held views opposite to those of Sir Thomas Eliot on the necessity of warmth at night. The 8th chapter doth show how man should order himself in sleep and watch and in wearing his apparel, in which he is convinced that to sleep on the back upright is utterly to be abhorred. When you do sleep, Let not your neck nor your shoulders, I'm sorry. When you sleep, let not your neck, nother your shoulders, nother your hands, nor feet, nor no other place of your body lie bare, but is covered. So you need to be covered up to here in your blankets. Your hands and your feet must be under the blanket. Let your nightcap be of scarlet. Yes, Druid. They use Y's everywhere. And, oh, that's so annoying. I guess Y's, the Y was instead of an I a lot of the time. And they use K's a lot where they don't seem to belong. So let your nightcap be of scarlet. And this I do advertise you to cause to be made a good thick quilt of cotton, or ells of pure flax, or of clean wool. And so flax, I think, is flax. So linen. And let the covering of it be of white fustian, and lay it out on the feather bed that you do lie on, and in your bed lie, not too hot, not too cold, but in a temperance. So he's talking about little Red Riding Hood? No. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So your bed should not be too hot. It should not be too cold. It should be just right. In addition, the windows of the home, and especially those of the bedchamber, had to be closed at night, at a time when those who could do so slept within the drawn curtains of their beds also, in an attempt to defeat the drafts and cold in the unheated houses. And at this time, obviously people of means had, leaded glass windows and murder at the quilt show. No, this is murder behind your bed curtains. But I believe that, there certainly the peasantry, depending on, how well, peasants weren't necessarily they weren't necessarily dirt farmers. Some peasants were like the middle class. But some people, not only having unheated homes or homes that are heated with fireplaces, that lasted until the 20th century. Probably some people are still heating with wood stoves and fireplaces. I know we did for a while. But it's not so much the lack of heat. It's the fact that some of these people did not have window coverings. I know I read a book at some point where it would have been earlier than this. It probably was like the late 1300s, early 1400s when the story took place. But, and it was in like the area of the Netherlands. So they were speaking the old Dutch, whatever that language was like. I really don't know. But anyway, they did not have windows. They had like coverings, like a kind of like a oilcloth papery kind of, and that's not what it was either, but it was some kind of covering over the window. But they had the shutters they had to shut, so there was like not glass in the window. It was very expensive to get leaded glass in your windows. So I mean, think about that. We're not just talking about like having to deal with a fireplace to heat your home, but like literally you don't even have windows that seal tight. Nevertheless, discounting the value and medical significance of his instructions, Dr. Bordy gave reasonably clear ones on the materials which he thought were suitable for quilted nightcaps. And at a time when little has been written about the work at all, he shows that the difference of opinion which existed between himself and Sir Thomas Eliot on the subject of nightcaps was not on whether they should or should not be worn, but whether they should be quilted. Can you imagine the controversy over quilted nightcaps? Like, yes, wear a nightcap, but it better not be quilted, or you're going to get sick and die. Weird. Little else is to be found about quilted night garments, but a single reference is made in the wardrobe inventory of the Habsburg Charles V to 16 quilted silken nightshirts. Quilted silk nightshirts. I bet. That was fancy. That was at a time when he went to live in Spain after his retirement in 1556. It appears to be the only indication of quilted silk being used for garments other than for daytime wear. Quilting on day clothes had not reached the level of fashion to which it was to become in the 17th and 18th centuries. But a reference in a wardrobe account towards the end of Henry VIII's reign mentions one pair of linen sleeves, paned with gold over the arm, quilted with black silk, and wrought with flowers between the panes and at the hands. I bet that was pretty. Yeah, the stuff that the royals were wearing back then, gorgeous stuff. Sleeves were richly embroidered during the reigns of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, and it is probable that in this case the quilting was worked flat with backstitch. There's a book that I have I think it's a pretty famous book about Queen Elizabeth I's wardrobe, and there's a situation where like they found I don't know if it was in an abbey or some sort of religious a church or some sort of religious location in the UK. They found this some sort of ecclesiastical textile. It wasn't a garment, but it was like something that like covered maybe an altar cover or something like that. And they think that it is Elizabeth I, this particular dress that she wore in this very famous painting. So anyway, in this book, it talks about all of that. And then it talks about literally the clothes that she wore in many of her famous portraits, as well as, what this stuff looked like, how it was constructed. All that stuff is so fascinating. I've always been a quilter, but I really came at this historical stuff through historical costume. So, yeah, I have those references a lot of the times. And when I think about this kind of stuff, it always takes me to the costuming. So it's interesting to me that Averil Colby kind of took that sort of, that sort of route as well. The making of fabric armor, such as the quilted jack, was listed among contemporary trades in Thomas Newberry's book, Divus Pragmaticus, The Great Merchant Man, which was published as a children's instruction book, the receipt for its printing being entered in the accounts of Stationers' Hall for 1562 to 63. A children's instruction book. Like, books were a big deal back then. Not everybody had books. For there to be a children's book. Received of Alexander Lace for his license for printing. Okay. They've spelled printing. Pryntyynge. That's like longer than the actual, right? I guess it's about the same. Yeah, it's one letter longer than we actually spell printing today. In the preface, the author calls up men of all trades and professions to come and buy from Divus Pragmaticus, to the end that children may learn to read and write their designations, as well as their wares and implements. And in many pages of rhyming couplets, children would have enjoyed that. Rhyming couplets, they're listed exhaustively. These are listed exhaustively from fine pomanders, fine toothpickers, and whistles, to harness helmets, mail coats, and jackets, as well as to tailors and quilters who would be connected with these trades. So, yeah, it sounds like this is a book about the trades, but it's an instruction book for children. Descriptions and accounts of the wearing of fabric armor continued throughout the 16th century, and from this period, 2 examples at least are known to have survived. A German military skirt with a quilted lining of heavy blue linen, thickly padded with flax and dating from about the first 30 years of the century, is in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum of New York. Ooh, we could go see that. An arming doublet in private ownership, also in New York, may have been made even earlier. It has been attributed to the 15th century, but the owner, Mr. C.O. von Kainbusch, believes it to be of 16th century workmanship, but not later than a mid-century date. It will be seen that the quilting was done in horizontal lines on chamois leather sewn on canvas, with mail sleeves extending well over the breast and back. The fastening down the front originally had 7 buttons. Half of the back has been prepared with linen, and leather laces are sewn about waist level for the purpose of attaching other garments. So that would have been like along the bottom of this garment. This, I mean, it's basically like a jacket. I'll show it to you in a minute. It was a doublet. So like at the bottom of it, they would have little eyelets where there would be leather laces through there to like tie it to your pants. And sometimes I think that is not a bad idea. You know, have you ever had like a shirt that was just like that much too short? And you don't want a crop shirt, and you want to be able to like raise your arms or bend forward without your shirt riding up. Well, if your shirt was tied to your pants in about 6 different spots, you would have this problem, right? Of course, you'd also have to have somebody help you get dressed because it's really hard to tie those little things on the back of you. So this example of fabric armor is said to be unique and only one of its kind extant. It too is probably of German origin. Other examples of quilted garments made during the century which have survived include 2 sets of pink silk quilted doublets. Pink doublets. I love that. Breast, back, and fold, padded with cotton, which date from the end of the period and in the collection of the Pitt Rivers Museum at Oxford. So this is the doublet she's talking about. And, you know, I mean, I think it's in surprisingly good shape considering that it's the 16th century. A jack containing a medal, not commonly sewn without the padding, bears an historical interest, according to John Proctor's contemporary account of Wyatt's rebellion in 1554. After his desertion by many of his followers, Wyatt fell into so great extreme of anguish and sorrow as writing a letter of expostulation to some of his familiars abroad in reprehension. I can't even read today. So somebody who's familiars abroad in reprehension of their infidelity in that they sticked not to him so fast as they promised. He bedewed the paper, whereupon he wrote with tears issuing so abundantly from his eyes as it would bear no ink. So he cried the paper wet. And so leaving to write, calling for a privy coat that he had quilted with angels not long before, which might serve both for his defense and a refuge for his necessity, being in another country. For England, said he, is no place for us to rest in. There can be no doubt that the coat was made after the manner of a jack, or jacket, with angels, a gold piece then worth the equivalent of about 10 shillings, sewn into the padding in place of the usual metal or horn scales. His precautions, of course, came too late. Crying the paper wet, yeah. Mention of the type of armor with which quilted fabric was worn can be found in fiction and, in fact, throughout the last half of the century, although not all of it proved to be effective protection in combat. The tale of Sir Walter Scott's Lay of the Last Minstrel was set in the border country in the middle of the 1500s and in the battle between Sir Richard Musgrave and the heroic Lord Cranston. Cranston's lance of more avail pierced through like silk the borderer's mail. Through shield and jack and action past, deep in his bosom broke at last. Soul tears keep the devil away. Yeah. The True Use of Armory by William Wyerley, published in 1592, contains an account of the honorable life and languishing death of Sir John de Gratby, capital Abos, one of the knights elected by the first founder of the Garter into the noble order. So the Order of the Garter is, I can't remember the details, but it's one of those things that people get bestowed upon them as people that are royal adjacent. I don't believe just anybody can get the Royal of Garter, but I do know that it's one of the more popular ones. His life was spent fighting one battle after another, all recounted with most bloodthirsty detail, and in fair combat Sir John usually was the victor. But in one, in spite of his ability to shear through metal and fabric armor, he was ambushed and outnumbered by 30 of his enemies. And here's some more couplets. The instructed 30 found me where I deal, so huge and mighty blows as that no plate, no hardened steel, no quilt, no warped meal could make resist, but yielded open gate. To my sharp axe, my blows so heavy sate, but here these 30 cease me in the fray, and by fine force they bear me thence away. Okay, so those weren't couplets. But, he got a quilt in there. Padded and quilted garments were worn under tournament armor, and the quilted jack was included among items of Elizabethan military armor for light troops. Sir John Smith's Instructions, Observations, and Orders Militaire for the years 1591 to 1595 include an order for archers. So archers should wear either eyelet-holed doublets that will resist the thrust of a sword or dagger, covered with some trim and gallant kind of colored cloth to the liking of the captain. So, you're going to be conscripted archers, and you're going to come with your bows and arrows to fight with us, and then we're going to tell you what you can wear. Or else jacks of mail quilted upon fustian. Some of his later comments on military matters proved to be unacceptable, and he was committed to the Tower. But no exception was taken in his views on fabric defenses. Descriptions of quilted armor were given in Spenser's Fairy Queen. Oh, Lord. We already talked about the Fairy Queen a bunch in the first chapter. And in his view of the present state of Ireland, written in 1596, he describes a number of military garments and adds, "All these that I have rehearsed unto you be not Irish garments, but English. For the quilted leather jack is English. For it was the proper weed of the horseman, as ye may read in Chaucer, where he describeth Sir Topas his apparel and armor." Topas? His apparel and armor when he went to fight against the giant in his robe of Shackleton. Which Shackleton is a kind of gilded leather with which they used to embroider their Irish jacks. Okay. So, quilted leather jackets are English, not Irish, but then he's talking about Shackleton, which is a kind of leather used to make Irish jackets. Okay. Records of quilted garments, whether of domestic or military types, probably outnumber those of the bed quilt. But better than any record are the examples of some quilts which actually have survived. Of others which did not survive, however, records show that they were made of satin or silk, which would account for their lack of staying power. Although the fate of one was decided not by wear and tear, but by explosion. A bedspread of quilted taffeta was on Darnley's bed in the house of Kirk, in Kirk of the Fields, which was blown up and destroyed, and presumably the quilt with it, in 1567. Druid, how dareth thee wearing such a waistcoat in thy armory? So, other silk quilts appear among items in household inventories. A number of these, taken from old Welsh inventories, are mentioned in traditional quilting. And some of the earliest are listed in 1551 among the household goods at Powis Castle of Edward, the last feudal baron of Powis. In the new chamber, over ye garden, item a quilt of red silk. In the nursery, item a quilt and a coverlet of dorns. Dorns? It may be that the nursery quilt was not of silk, as this is not mentioned especially. Other quilts are included in an inventory of goods belonging to Sir John Perrott at Carew Castle in 1592 and have their respective values attached. Item IJ, old quilts of yellow, it should be sarsenet, but they've spelled it oddly. And it says XXS. I'm sure that's the price, but I don't know how to translate that. I don't know if what would XXS be? 20 shillings? No. Item, a changeable silk quilt. Price, XXS. So, again, 20 shillings? And item IJ. Okay. Then the third one is an an old black and white silk quilt for a bed. Price IIJS. So again, I'm wondering, are these Roman numerals? Now the changeable silk quilt, that one to me says that it is the warp and the weft are different colors, so you get that really cool changeable look. There's oh gosh, what's the oak shot? I think it's like a shot cotton or a shot silk and linen. You could do either one of those. I think silk dupioni is often like a shot like this. But it's really cool when you have something that's like a very tight weave, and the warp and the weft are different colored threads. And so depending on how you hold the fabric, it can look different colors. I love that. So for the last item to be priced so much lower than the others. So, okay, IIJS is much less expensive than XXS. So I guess IIJS must be, I don't know, 2 shillings and something. This is just an absolute guess on my part, and I'm most likely wrong. But anyway, it is likely that it was of an earlier make, but worth less because it was worn, although there is no indication at the age of any of them. The fact that 6 quilts are entered as one item suggests that they were of an ordinary type, probably for everyday use. Although sarsenet was a silk material, it was in common use by the 16th century. Okay, so IJ must mean 6, because this first line is item IJ, old quilts of yellow sarsenet. So IJ must be 6. And then what is IIJS? I don't know. A much quoted entry from the inventory of Kenilworth of the goods of Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, in 1584 probably refers to a different kind of quilt altogether. In a fair quilt of crimson satin, VI breadths, IIJ yards. So I guess, 3/4 nail deep. These are, Lord, these are some crazy, I mean, this is all sizing, I'm sure. Oh, thank you, Druid. You know, I mean, again, and I go back to the fact that, like, these are transcriptions from old, you know, and obviously a different century in a different country, so goodness only knows. But VI breadths, I'm guessing, would be 6 breadths by 6 yards, and then 3/4 nail deep. No idea. 3/4 nail deep is maybe how thick the quilt is, like how lofty. All lozenged over with silver twist. Okay, we know lozenge would be like the elongated diamonds. Silver twist in the midst of a cinquefoil with a garland of ragged staves, fringed about with a small fringe of crimson silk, lined through with white fustian. It sounds interesting. It sounds very royal, in my opinion, or very, well, yes, it's the Earl of Leicester. Any quilt notable for its rich materials and embroidery of this kind would be more appropriate for a day cover when the bed was not in use. So yeah, I could see, you know, I feel like the things that are silk and satiny, it makes total sense that they're just for pretty, as they say in Pennsylvania Dutch, and not something that you'd regularly be, you know, tossing and turning under. A remarkable quilt of Indian work has been preserved at Hardwick Hall in Derbyshire, in which the quilting was done in backstitch. And, you know, if you are remembering, backstitch is indicative of quilts in the UK. In the US, very rarely, in fact, never have I seen a backstitch in regular quilting. Derbyshire. Thank you, Molly. So yeah, that's definitely the that's what when you see that backstitch, you're looking at something that's from the UK. So the quilting is done in backstitch using red, blue, green, and orange silk threads. through 2 layers of unbleached cotton with a thin interlining of cotton wool. Okay. I'm guessing that would be cotton that's been carded to make the batting, like regular cotton batting. Its date is not recorded, but it has been suggested on good authority that it is of 16th century workmanship, probably made in the Malda district in Bengal. And if so, it is likely to have been made before 1575. This is very interesting to me, and I would love to have seen what this really looked like, because the different types of quilts and quilting traditions coming out of these different areas of India. Obviously, the UK had access to all this stuff because, this is a little bit earlier in the game, but, once colonialism was up and thriving, they could, snatch and grab anything from India. And I'm wondering how much this stuff, back in the 1500s looks like the things that we would see as like folk art of these areas in India. The different Indian traditions of quilting are really just coming back to light in the past few years, I think. Years ago, I don't remember ever seeing much about, stuff coming out of India and what it looked like. And now, there's a number of really well-known Indian quilters that teach those different techniques. This provenance is based on the relationship between the quilt patterns and those with which the Islamic architecture in Malda was decorated. And a date previous to 1575 follows naturally on this reasoning, as the dynasty of Malda was destroyed in the year 1575 to 1576. The general design of the quilt consists of a number of rectangular compartments outlined by a series of patterned borders containing a great variety of geometrical, stylized, and pictorial patterns. No, I thought maybe this picture on the next page, but it's not. Closely arranged on the ground, the close spacing of the quilted patterns all over the work leaves very little to be seen of the woven material. Human and animal figures decorate some of the borders. Men on horseback and on foot, armed with swords and shields, and accompanied by dogs, are shown on one. And on another, men and women seated on chairs under trees are playing what appears to be a game of chess. Other figures include elephants, each having on its back a howdah and riders. A howdah. I'm guessing that's one of those little, like, cabs that they would perch on top of or maybe it just means a saddle, an elephant saddle. Let's see, with men on the ground between them. Tame birds and animals are shown, as well as patterns of the Hindu peacock with a serpent in its beak. Formal flower and leaf patterns fill many of the geometrical outlines. The quilt is in a very fragile condition now. Much of the cotton is discolored and worn, and the once brilliant silks have lost their luster. But still, it is possible to distinguish the fine workmanship through the glass top of the case in which it is kept. So in 1971, this was still available somewhere. Is she going to say where? Did she already say where? I don't think so. Or no, she did say. Yes, I'm sorry. It's preserved at Hardwick Hall in Derbyshire. Let's see, where did I look? Okay. When fully spread, the quilt measures 10 feet 8 inches long and 7 feet 3 inches wide. So this is a big one. And a section of one corner measuring approximately 25 by 18 inches is illustrated in Needlework Through the Ages. So this is a book. I'm not sure who wrote that. Let's see if she says. What chapter are we in? 6. 18. Ugh. Of course, she never gives, in her endnotes, she doesn't give the actual. She doesn't give the authors in these. Boo, hiss. Ooh, okay. Druid has info. Okay, a howdah or huda, derived from the Arabic, which means bed carried by a camel, also known as a hathi howdah. Hathi, is a carriage which is positioned on the back of an elephant or occasionally some other animal, such as a camel, and used most often in the past to carry wealthy people during progressions or processions, hunting or warfare. Yeah, so I think we can in our mind's eye imagine the elephant with some fancy little thing on top. A symbol of wealth for the owner. Yeah. I actually have a little I was just looking at it the other day. It's a little. I think it might be made of like paper mache or something. It's. I'm guessing vintage. I don't think it's like antique. I don't think it's that old, but it is a little elephant with the little that thing on it. That's what it is. Well, that'll have to be show and tell for you next time. So, Needlework Through the Ages. I'd have to find out who wrote that. On which it is possible to see that a number of narrow, straight, and circular dividing borders are patterned with a small scrolling pattern, worked alternately in red and blue silk, which is very similar in arrangement to those seen in Welsh patterns. Without the evidence of 16th century inventories and other household records, it would be difficult to establish the existence of bed quilts made in England or Wales at the time, although even these records do not contain proof that they were so. The almost casual inclusion of them among other items infers that they were not of unusual value, and so probably they were made then, as it is known they were later, by the women of the household and used until they were worn out, with the same lack of concern as that shown by Sir Thomas Eliot towards his nightcap. Quilts of European and Indian make, which are known to have survived, have done so to a great extent because the linen and cotton, of which most were made, were unattractive to moths and were durable and of good quality. Today's the first time you've heard that word. Yeah, I'd always thought of it as just like a carriage or some, I didn't know that there was a actual terminology for that little thing on top of the animals. A German quilt, of which detail is illustrated, and I'll show you that in a minute, was made from 2 layers of heavy linen with the pattern outlines padded with firm cord and sewn with backstitch. A flat quilted ground in darning stitch surrounds unpadded animal, bird, and leaf shapes, behind which the backing material has been cut. So she is referring back to the other chapter. Yes, okay. So this was the thing that we looked at in a previous chapter, the little drawing. And then this is the actual deal. And a little bit difficult to see, but you could see how it's broken up into these like octagons. And then there's the little square there in the middle. The practice of cutting the lower layer of material does not seem to have been a common one, but a difficult and similar process is described for the making of a farthingale of later date, the 17th century, in which the quilted patterns were stuffed with cotton and combined with embroidery in pulled work. Oh, I bet that was gorgeous. After the embroidery was done, the coarse backing material was cut away behind it. There's a number of different needlework techniques that require cutting fabric or pulling threads out. And, I've looked at examples of it. I've never done the pulled thread work myself, but in looking at those pictures, they're beautiful, beautiful examples. I think I have a couple of books that maybe have like instructions for how to do it, but you often see them in Piecework magazine. They often have examples, and it just, the thought of like doing some really tiny, like labor intensive embroidery and then pulling out the scissors and like cutting, it gives me a heart attack. Kind of the same thing if any of our knitters are here today, but I know Anna Maker is a knitter, and if you've ever knitted a cardigan, they have there's a thing you do where you knit this one like strip in the front, and then you take your scissors and you literally cut that area of the knitting. Oh Lord. The only sweater I've ever knitted like fully from start to finish was not, I was like, there's no way I'm knitting a cardigan after I put this effort into it. Is going to be a pull over the head sort of knitting, sweater, because there ain't no way I'm taking scissors to this thing. I'm working on a knitting project right now that has been really intensive, and I should have brought that to my desk today to show you. So yeah, knitting is one of those things like I digress. Human figures, animal and bird shapes, and many others, as well as geometrical patterns, were common to Indian and Portuguese quilting. I think she's the only person I think that has ever brought up Portuguese quilting. Portugal, I really don't know a whole lot about the country and the history, but they're sort of down there in a warmer area. I think a lot of people like go to on summer vacations in parts of Portugal. So I always think of Portugal as being like Spain. They're down there sort of in warm areas. So it surprises me that there is a tradition of Portuguese quilting. I guess there are mountains in Portugal, like the Azores. I think. Gosh, I sit here and say things like to the internet, live, and half the time I'm totally wrong. But yeah, I'm surprised. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about Portugal to add to that, but let's see. An elaborate quilt in private ownership in Italy is made of linen stitched with gold-colored silk thread with patterns containing these kinds of features. Although the main decoration is pictorial in character, a large center panel shows a scene of ships on water, probably the sea, as waves are indicated, which are typical of mid-16th century Mediterranean galleys. So Mediterranean. Huh. And a tower shape, which could be a lighthouse or a small fortress. Among other patterns is a double-headed eagle, which is to be found in other Indo-Portuguese work, and figures in sarongs occupy the spaces in an arcaded border of arches supported by pillars worked with a spiral pattern. I mean, wow, this sounds like a lot of imagery and stuff that if I had seen this in person, I would be pulling this stuff out going like, well, double-headed eagle looks like, kind of coat of arms type stuff, and the spirals, like those are Welsh, and figures in sarongs, like that's a very specific type of garment, like there's a geography for that. So yeah, this stuff sounds really interesting. By the end of the century, quilting was in common use on caps for nightwear, unless you were friends with Sir Thomas Eliot, in which case he says, throw away that quilted night hat, for daywear and for armor. Bed quilts were common also, certainly in upper-class households, and probably others of a humbler type were among the possessions of most good housekeepers, of whatever social standing. In 1587, the price of a quilt belonging to William Jennison of Newcastle was given as 6 shillings and 8 pence, a drop in value as compared with 20 shillings for one of the Powys Castle quilts. So I was right. That was 20 shillings. XXS is 20 shillings. And although no indication is given as to the quality or condition of either, presumably both were new or nearly so. Perhaps it is appropriate for the records of the 16th century to end with a reference by Shakespeare in Henry IV, about 1597, in words spoken by Henry, Prince of Wales, to the stout Sir John Falstaff. How now, blown Jack? How now, quilt? It was clear that by then the appearance of a padded quilt was familiar enough for the likeness to be understood readily by an audience, and appreciated as a joke against the portly figure. Was there also a double reference to his shape and his name in likening him to a blown or overstuffed Jack? So I'm guessing this is the same thing as saying, hey, stout gentleman, look at your jacket all blown out. Looks like you're wearing a quilt. Rude. All right, so that's the end of the 16th century. Let's see, the 17th century. I think we can do it. Okay, so we've got some intel about Portugal. So it snows in Portugal. Mountain frequency varies depending on region and elevation. Snow is very rare in coastal cities like Lisbon and Porto. But Portugal has mountains, okay, I knew that, and can snow particularly heavy in the Serra da Estrela. So that would be something star. Okay. I'm trying to think like on a globe or a map of the world, like where, like what latitude, is that latitude? Yeah, latitude that Portugal's at. But that makes sense that it's sort of a warm place, but it's got some mountainous regions. Yeah, Spain's left side, but then that begs the question, what latitude is Spain? I'm like, in reference to the US, like is it at mid-Atlantic latitude? Is it down at Florida latitude? I don't know. I'm so bad. Geography was so bad. So bad at geography. Um, yeah, I still have trouble finding all the states of the US, like where the square ones in the middle belong. No offense to you guys that live there. Okay, so New York and Portugal are about the same latitude. Okay. Ah, Gulf Stream. Okay. Molly, why am I not surprised that your husband has some nerdiness about him too? My father-in-law is a big weather nerd, and I guess by that same token, my husband is too. All right, so chapter 7, the 17th century. The 17th century saw a considerable rise in the popularity of quilting for clothing and bed furnishings in England and Wales, but a decline in its use as defensive armor. Ah, so we're going to get out of defensive armor and clothing and possibly look at some quilts. Items also appear in accounts for quilted padding for furniture and padded and quilted linings for trunks and coffers in which clothes were kept or carried when traveling. So, oh my gosh, I have an old suitcase that has quilted lining. It never occurred to me that, yeah, that might be good for your clothes. I'm drinking soda today. It's just been that kind of week. Continuing trade with the East encouraged the use of color and rich materials, as well as of surface embroidery, mostly in floral patterns worked with silk and metal threads. But fine linen was not supplanted by silk and satin, and towards the end of the century, very fine quilting was worked on white cotton and linen, in which the patterns were padded with thin cord. Thanks to the durable nature of the materials, a number of examples of this work have survived in a reasonable state of repair. Most of the patterns reflecting the floral and informal character of those embroidered in color on silk or satin. Embroidery in white cotton or linen thread was added to the cord patterns on garments, but there seems to be little or no evidence of it on large quilts or curtains. There is little doubt that this work was done in and for the big houses and their occupants. Examples of clothing which remain are of elaborate workmanship and fine quality material, in which it would be impossible to do anything but live a leisured life. And the quilts and hangings were made on a scale which was suitable only for large beds in high rooms. So, yeah, I mean, I'm guessing like these curtains bed curtains must have been really, really long. So they would know that this was not a trundle bed. Travelers from Europe to the East brought home stories of the peoples in their countries in which the imported quilts and embroideries had been made, and the adventures of one of those, Edward Terry, a nephew of Sir Thomas Roe, who was founder of the West India Company, have been given in a clear and instructive account of all he saw in the early 17th century, including the uses of cotton from seed sowing to the quilting and embroidering of the woven material. Although the account of his journeys is added to those of an Italian, Pietro della Valle, and his name is omitted from the flyleaf, he being described simply as a relation of Sir Thomas Roe's. His descriptions of all he saw show him to have been an excellent observer. The voyage to the East Indies began on the 3rd day of February 1615, when our fleet fell down from Gravesend into Tilbury Hope, where we continued till the 8th day following. An adverse wind forced our abode until the 9th of March, on which day it pleased God to send us what we had much desired, a northeast wind, which made us leave the weary road and set sail for East India. What he saw and related belonged to the early part of the century, although his writing of it was not published until 1665. Oh, okay. So quilting has a long and storied history in Portugal dating back centuries. Believe that the art of quilting first arrived in Portugal through contact with the Moors. Okay. And then, oh, you've got some other stuff here that I missed. Let me look at it on the screen. So as Portugal entered the Age of Discovery, quilting became a means of storytelling. Okay. Well, and this sounds like what was described here with all of these different things. They developed their own regional style or distinct styles. In the north, quilts were characterized by geometric patterns reflecting Celtic and Roman cultures, and in the south, they featured vibrant colors indicating floral motifs. I'm sorry, intricate floral motifs, reflecting the region's Moorish heritage. Fascinating. So yeah, and that would make sense because the Moorish heritage would have been Islamic, and they would use more florals, and they would not do things that were depictions of people. I don't think it's more of the geometric stuff, but also Celtic. The Celtic stuff was also geometric. So interesting. After accounts of the growing of cotton and indigo, speaking of cotton, Jill and I are going to be doing our experiment soon, making our own cotton batting. If you guys remember, if you saw, I want to say it was one of our Instagram streams, and I think I may have shown you guys here too. I have my fiber carding things. They look like dog brushes, but I have been schooled on how they're different from dog brushes. And I have all of this cotton that has not been ginned. So it's full of cotton seeds and other detritus. So I will look forward to making my own batting, just like these folks of antiquity did. So after the accounts of growing of cotton and indigo and the processes of making, dyeing, and printing patterns on cloth, he continued with a description of the natives there, who show very much ingenuity in their curious manufactures. As in their silk stuffs, which they most artificially weave. Artificially weave? I mean, how would you not artificially weave something? Do things grow woven? Some of them very neatly mingled, either with silver or gold or both. Now, one thing to remember about the silver and gold, any of the garments or the fabrics themselves that had silver and gold threads, sumptuary laws limited who could have access to that stuff. So we're talking about like the richest rich people, like literally right below royalty. And in some cases, I think the gold may have been reserved for royalty only. As also in making excellent quilts of their stained cloth or of fresh colored taffeta lined with their pintadoet, Pintadoet, or of their satin lined with taffeta, betwixt which they put cotton wool and work them together with silk. Those taffeta or satin quilts are excellently stitched by them, being done as evenly and in as good order as if they had been drawn out for them. I'm sorry. As if they had been drawn out to them for their direction. Now, who says they didn't draw these things out? This man observing may not really know what was going on. And in a further account of how people of better quality traveled, people of better quality, excuse me, I just lost my place. People of better quality traveled. He describes what he calls slight coaches with two wheels, covered on the top and back end, but the forepart and sides open unless they carry women. Okay, well, I guess women got closed-in coaches. These coaches will carry 4 persons besides the driver, but 2 may lie at ease and at length in them upon quilts that lie in the body of them, upheld by girt web, with which they are bottomed, which makes them far more easy. So I'm guessing it sounds like these things had some quilts in them that you could lounge and cover yourself with a quilt. The travels of a noble Roman, Signor Pietro della Valle, covered the same country, East India and Arabia Deserta, and in a series of familiar letters to his friend, Signor Mario Schipano, one dated November the 7th, 1623, tells of a visit to King... Oh, I'm not even going to try. Okay. It's Vuktapa Naika? So it's VEUK dash TAPA, like Tapa, but the last A has the little over it. And then the last name, I'm assuming is the last name, Naeika. The king was seated upon a kind of porch on the opposite side of a small court, upon a pavement somewhat raised from the earth, covered with a canopy like a square tent, but was made of boards and gilded. The floor was covered by a piece of tapestry, something old, and the king sat after the manner of the East upon a little quilt on the outside of the tent, having at his back 2 great cushions of fine white silk. Neither Edward Terry nor Pietro della Valle recorded having seen any quilted garments in their travels. But Sir Thomas Herbert related in, oh my lord, why do they name their books these crazy things? So, in this particular book called Some Years' Travels into Diverse Parts of Asia and Afrique, Afrique, I'm guessing they're calling Africa Afrique. Their habit is a quilted coat of calico tied under the left arm. Quilted garments were worn in England throughout the century, although regulations concerning armor contain fewer references to those worn as fabric defense. Gervase Markham remarked on the need for head protection in Decades and Epistles of War and in Soldiers' Accidents, 1625. And there is a coverlet here. I think we've seen it before, but I am drawing a complete blank. So let's look at it. She is not referencing it right now, so. But it's got a little fringy. It's got some cool corner stuff. And then this small medallion in the center with all these other floral things around it. A cool looking coverlet. The details of that coverlet is a linen coverlet with embroidered patterns in colored silks on a flat quilted ground finished with a knotted fringe. English 17th century, 53 by 50 inches. Okay. The shot should have on his head a good and sufficient Spanish morion, well lined in the head with a quilted cap of strong linen and bound with linen ear plates. And the Honorable Roger North in Examen mentions padded silk armor, which was pistol-proof. Now, sir, I'm going to have to say that padded silk armor is probably not going to save you from gunfire. And gosh, when did they start using pistols? I mean, was that the late 1600s? I guess it had to have been. Yeah, it had to have been. It is likely also that civilian caps and clothing often were reinforced with a quilted padding as a reasonable precaution against attacks by the roaming ruffians of the time. I mean, I guess something quilted will keep, maybe save you against something sharp. Certainly against somebody like attacking you with their hands. Quilted garments similar to the arming doublet still were worn under main armor, but portraits painted in the latter end of the century show the gorget, which is padded with quilting and lined with silk. I think the gorget was some kind of, I'm drawing a complete blank, but it was some kind of top thing. And they're worn by then merely as fashion. Much more numerous are the records and examples of domestic quilting in many kinds of clothing and furnishings, which increased as a popular fashion throughout the 1600s. The use of embroidered patterns and color, worked on a flat quilted ground, and colored thread for the quilting itself predominated. Quilted garments were fashionable for men as well as for women. Men's jackets and waistcoats of quilted silk and satin with inner linings of soft wadding would have been preserved, and a suit of white quilted satin doublet and breeches, worn about 1620 to 1630, is in the collections of the Victoria and Albert Museum. Waistcoats of white linen with cord-quilted patterns were worn from the last part of the century for at least 100 years. The pistol originates in the 16th century. Okay. Early handguns. Okay. Thank you. Now I have learned another new tidbit today. Portugal had a rich quilting tradition, and pistols were introduced in 1570. So on the other side of here, we've seen both of these pictures before. We've got the women's waistcoat and jacket, and I think we've all agreed that that looks like a snuggly jacket, which we would all love to have. And then here at the bottom is some corded quilting. It says it's a cord quilted linen robe, and I feel like we've seen this one too. It is very pretty. I think that would be a really amazing thing to wear. Speaking of the V&A, have you guys seen any of the footage from the Chanel exhibit at the V&A? Oh, how I would love to see that. They did a thing. I was at my in-laws the other day, and they were doing a thing about fashion, and they were talking about that show. And I can't remember. It's like, I don't know if it's like 100 or more garments, and they're just in these cases, just lined up. They're, the classic Chanel suit. Very cool. Much more numerous are the records and examples. Oh, I'm sorry. I've already read that. Yeah. Quilted waistcoats and bodices with flower patterns worked in color on the quilted ground were fashionable for women's dress. The waistcoat illustrated, that we've already seen, was made during the 1680s, and a jacket, also of English work, of about the same date and made of white cotton padded with wool, was quilted in chain stitch with blue silk thread. Now, this is different from the back stitching. And so the chain stitch, I mean, if you embroider, you know what a chain stitch is, but, it's essentially like you're looping around your needle, and the needle's, going in and out. And so imagine it looking like just a regular running stitch, but then you have the loops of thread that are getting caught as you make that chain stitch. So, it's an interesting way to do that, to quilt using that stitch. I feel like it's overkill, but maybe it brought some strength to the garment. It is in the possession of the Nordiska Museet, Stockholm, and is illustrated in the Art of Embroidery. A jacket of even earlier date, made at the beginning of the century, has small dots of brownish silk, worked in the spaces between the quilted pattern in backstitched red silk. A number of other examples have been preserved, and although similar in style and decoration, none is exactly alike. And I love that. I mean, that's just like our quilts today. When we find a vintage or antique quilt, it may be a pattern that's familiar, or some type of fabric that's you've seen similar before, but no two are ever exactly the same. Other kinds of quilted day clothes were worn by women. The farthingale, mentioned in the previous chapter, was of 17th century work, and the elaborate kind of pattern, combining quilting and decorative embroidery stitches in white thread, is an early example of what was to become a rage in the 18th century. When this embroidery was equal in importance to the corded quilting. Part of the skirt and the border of a linen robe, which we just looked at, shows a formal diaper pattern of quilted cord, and on the border, informal outlines of daffodil, tulip, carnation, I cannot pronounce this word today. It's convolvulus. It's some type of flower, obviously. Convolvulus. Welcome, Friday Eve. And other flower and leaf shapes, quilted and running stitch, can be recognized. This type of naturalistic flower pattern, sometimes outlined with backstitch in flat quilting, and sometimes with the outlines raised with cord, is a characteristic of much 17th century quilting, which seems to have become less popular in the early years of the 18th century. The flowers resemble those which were worked in colored silks, but it is much more usual to find them on an unquilted ground, as they are on the border of the robe, which we just looked at, and later on the elaborate 18th century quilt from the great Tangley Manor. Tangley Manor? A white quilt in private ownership in Somerset, similar in pattern to the great Tangley quilt, but with vases or urns of flowers in place of baskets, probably dates from the last quarter of the 17th century, and appears to have been made at some time from hangings or curtains. There are a number of joins, and the quilting was done before the joins were made. The pillow sham, which we will look at, is an exception to the common method of quilting naturalistic flowers on an unquilted ground. And in this case, the outlined flower shapes are worked on a ground of the simple square diamond pattern, all the work being done in flat quilting. So, oh, thank you, Druid. Convolvulus, a twining plant with trumpet-shaped flowers. Yeah. Okay, they're invasive weeds. So this pillow sham. I mean, look at this thing. I'm getting close enough that you can see that diamond, like it's like almost like a hash marked pattern because it's so tiny. I mean, that's a pillow sham. So, I mean, we can assume, pillows were probably about the same size and maybe smaller than what we're used to today. So that is a really intense quilting. Other examples of naturalistic patterns may be found in some garments of wadded quilting, but in this type of work, there is always a quilted ground pattern. The pot of flowers worked on the corner of a border of running flower patterns on a man's white satin jacket. Women's petticoats were quilted, many of the patterns being raised with cord or else flat quilted, as well as those padded with wadding. Although more concerned with lace on petticoats in Tyrannus, or the Mode, 1661, John Evelyn may have seen them of quilted red and white silk or of white material and the quilting done with red thread. And then these are his lines about that. Short under petticoats, pure fine, some of Japan stuff, some of, and I think this is supposed to be Chinese, China or Chine, but he's saying some Chine. Some made of Japan stuff, some Chine, with knee-high galloon bottomed, another quilted white and red with broad Flanders lace below. Maybe he means sheen, not shine, but nonetheless. In spite of the dire results threatened by the disapproving, to those who chose to defy them or ignore warnings, a cap was considered to have distinct advantages. It's light for summer, and in cold it sits, close to the skull, a warm house for the wits. I like that one. Yeah, that would be cute, like embroidered on like a beanie. Light for the summer, and in cold it sits, close to the skull, a warm house for the wits. And so they continued to be worn. Women's and children's caps were quilted toward the end of the century, but as the fashion continued for some years into the 18th century, it is difficult to date any examples with certainty, unless some record or reliable history is attached to them. Yes, they are trying to be classy with the French. Yeah, Afrique. The quilting on the children's cap, let's see, I think this is later in the chapter, maybe. No, of course, it's going to be in another chapter entirely. Let's see. Yeah, so these are these children's caps that we're getting ready to talk about here. You can see their little bonnets. So, and what a great thing to do some really, really like heavy duty quilting. I mean, a cap is a tiny thing. So I'm sure it was a great way to like really, put your chops out there. So the quilting on the child's cap is in character with patterns worked in the 17th century, but as it appears to have been made from quilting done for another garment and cut to shape for the cap pieces, it may have been made up early in the 18th century from material quilted some years before. Convolvulus. I don't know why I could not say that. The method of making caps is described later and illustrated in the figures we just looked at. The patterns shown are more widely spaced than in caps, which are known to be of the 18th century date, and the pricked holes and pulled stitches allow for more ventilation than usual, which makes it a matter of speculation as to whether John Locke's arguments on the inadvisability of head coverings may have may have persuaded the mother of the wearer to compromise between tradition and the then revolutionary way of bringing up children, making their head get some air. Mr. Locke's ideas were well respected and, to our eyes, commendably tough in many ways. And he recommended in 1693 that if nature had so well covered a child's head with hair and strengthened it with a year or two's age, then he can run about by day without a cap. It is best by night that a child should be also without one, there being nothing then more exposes to headache, colds, catarrhs, that is Catarrhs, that's like a phlegm, coughs, and other diseases than keeping the head warm. So your head should be cold, and you will not have a headache, a cold, a phlegm, or a cough. Right, Molly? There's so much about hats. And I mean, like, I don't know. You know, if you know anything about history stuff, you know that they had some crazy ideas back in the day about, like, how you got sick and what ways to cure people. So it is of no surprise to me that they would spend a lot of time on hats, but they were crazy. Men wore day and night caps of embroidered linen, silk, and satin, but quilted caps for them do not appear to have been popular, as there is no mention of them, and so far one only has come to light, which may have been worn at the end of the century. The unusual shape of the cap suggests that it may have been made during the 1690s to accommodate the high-horned wigs of this period, and which is until about 1710, but it has no recorded history. So this is what it looks like. And it says it's a quilted linen cap. The close cord quilting helps to retain the shape. So this is what that looks like. And I don't quite understand. I don't know if this is a bill or some kind of thing at the back. I'm not sure what that's all about and how that covers the head if you have some weird wig. And when they say, she's saying the high horned wigs, when I think of like weird wigs, I think of like the Marie Antoinette kind of stuff, these like big crazy like confections. So I'm having a hard time like trying to picture what a horned wig would be. Obviously high means it's big, I'm thinking, but yeah, I don't know how that hat would have worked. By the end of the century, in one way or another, quilting was used in almost every kind of garment to which it would have been applied with reason. But there is evidence in plenty to show that the quilted bed cover was of even more importance and must have been in use in every house of any consequences. Quilted pillow covers were made to match the quilts. Pillows were kept on the outside of the cover during the daytime, and when the pillow itself was not quilted, a pillow sham or false cover was laid over it. We still do that today. Oh, yes, the weird wigs for syphilis. Well, didn't Queen Elizabeth, and I mean, obviously she's, another century, but, like, she shaved her head, like, pretty far back, I think, because she had, all kinds of nasty skin stuff going on, and then she had a wig. Yeah. All the pictures of her is, like, no forehead. She's got a 5 head. So, yeah, so pillow shams. We still use them today. Written descriptions and accounts of quilts, as well as examples which have been preserved, leave no doubt as to the quality of the materials or of the fine needlework in them. Of the references to be found, most are among the possessions listed in inventories, wardrobe accounts, and so on, of the rich and of those in upper-class society. It is probable that a number of them had been imported, and sometimes this is mentioned, but others must have been made within the household for which the goods were listed. An inventory of the possessions of Sir Thomas Keyston of Hengrave was taken in 1603 and included one, I'm assuming this is supposed to be the quilt. It's TWILT. One twilt of tonsy taffeta sarsenet, embroidered all over with twist of yellow silk, with the escutcheons of Sir Thomas Keyston's and My Lady's arms. And a descriptive entry is included in the wardrobe accounts of King James I on the occasion of the marriage of his daughter, the Princess Elizabeth, to the Elector Palatine in 1609. Item to John Baker, our upholsterer, for 3 quilts of fustian lined with taffeta, filled with wool, and sewed with silk. And for 2 counterpoints of plush, both sides alike, sewed with silk. Embroideries of great richness are listed among the items of the inventory made at the time of the death of Henry Howard, Earl of Northampton, in 1614. And the description of a china quilt stitched in checker work, with yellow silk, the ground white, is typical of latter and surviving work, which is quilted with diaper patterns in white linen and sewed with yellow silk thread. These things sound beautiful. It's no wonder that they didn't survive, obviously, because they were made of very rich fabrics and textiles. And, I don't know for certain about like the bed linens and the upholstery and stuff, but this stuff, even the rich people would cut stuff up. I don't like these curtains anymore. These drapes are like so last year. They would cut them up and like upholster something with them, or like in the example of the Queen Elizabeth, the first dress. You can imagine those skirts were insane, like huge, voluptuous skirts, voluminous skirts, and so all of that yardage then was taken from the dress and used in this ecclesiastical setting. So my guess is like anything could have happened to quilts. Yes, Von Trapp family. Absolutely. So I can imagine that these hats and these little children's things were certainly cut down from bigger stuff. But the question is, was it garments that they were cut down from, or was it, old bed linens? Who knows? The company of merchants trading with the East India Company, who began trading in 1600, were responsible for importing in quantity into Britain the coveted chintzes, embroideries, and quilts. So we know more about chintzes than we probably want to, but this is like the big time. The chintzes are coming, and within 100 years, the chintzes are like the thing to have on your bed. By their description and enthusiasm for these things seen abroad, travelers like Edward Terry had prepared the ground at home, and the royal proclamation of Charles I in 1631 encouraged their entry into England by permitting their import, with many other goods, from the East Indias. Among the spices, sugar candy, and porcelain on the list were also rich carpets of Persia and Cambia. I wonder where that is. That is Cambaya. So I'm trying to think, like Persia is Iran. But yeah, I don't know what Cambaya or Cambia. Quilts of satin, taffety. I love the way that they spell the way they said it, right? So you can hear somebody else, taffety. Satin taffeta, painted calicos, Benjamin. That's one I've never heard of. The name Benjamin, but lowercase b. Damasks, silk, and taffeties of China. Quilts of China embroidered with gold. Quilts of Pitania. That's Pitania. I don't know where that is. Embroidered with silk. A delectable collection to back up the traveler's tales. It is possible that the carpets of Persia may have included those which were quilted and embroidered, as some Persian prayer and bath mats were so made. Oh, that's interesting. I know prayer cloths can certainly be made of anything, I guess. I don't know if they have to have, if there's a certain dimension they need to be, or if they need, if there's something special about the way they need to be made. But that's interesting. They may not have used like the intense carpet making of the Middle East to make those smaller mats. A sidelight on the fashionable taste of the time, as well as the price of quilts in the trade, is given in a letter of the East India Company written in 1641. The quilts of chintz being novelties, produced from £5 5s to £6 the pair. A further supply, therefore, is desired, And both as regards these and chintzes, more should be made with white grounds, and the branches and flowers to be in colors, and not, as those last sent, all in general of deep red ground and other sadder colors. In the same year, an entry taken from the table concerning textiles made in connection with the Book of Rates mentioned quilted materials sold by the length, striped, tufted, or quilted canvas with silk the piece containing 15 yards. And then it says IV, so 15 yards for, I don't know, can buy a coarse cotton cloth made in India. Earlier cambaya, probably from Portuguese. Oh, okay. They had so many different names, right, for these different kinds of cloths. And I guess sometimes it depended on the whatever the material was made of, wool, linen, cotton, and then the way that it was woven, or the way that the textile was made. So, like, was it a felted thing? Was it a woven thing? Was it a knitted thing? Yeah, very interesting. Some quilts were made of silk with reversible patterns and different colors on each side. Although padded with soft cord, the silks were of equal quality on each side, and not, as for linen and cotton quilts, with a more coarsely woven material for the backing. Single cord was used for most of the patterns, but where a thickening was needed, 2 or 3 strands were laid side by side, but not stitched separately, which is customary for cord padding. Animal and bird patterns were common to Eastern work, and when quilted, the use of 2 or more strands of cord is noticeable on the flanks and thicker parts of the bodies. The cord is tapered to a single strand where the pattern outlines narrow. Animal, bird, and stylized plant shapes sometimes were enclosed in geometrically shaped compartments, similar to the type shown, which I'm ready to show you in a sec. Okay. And let's see. Whoops, sorry. This style possibly influenced the pattern of the 16th century German quilt that we already looked at. So here we go. The little birdies. The bird patterns. And then this is the cotton quilt that she's talking about. Now that is something else. I mean, look at that. Gorgeous. How much more do we have to go? Okay, just one more page. The furor created by the novelty of the colored quilts may have been the reason for the preservation of some others of the time, which may have been considered to be sad in appearance. Their monochrome colors, such as indigo, dull yellow, or drab, or a light coffee color, would not have pleased the mood of the Restoration period, and perhaps they were banished to the bottom of the linen chest, while the more favored, with branches and flowers on a light ground, graced the beds. The quilt that we just looked at, this corner, may owe its survival to the cotton covers being of a somewhat dull and neutral color, but its value to the history of quilt patterns is that it contains several which are among those looked upon as traditional in England and Wales. Their relationship to some of the quilts shown in the frontispiece, so that's this, and to the host of others dating from the 17th to the 20th centuries is indisputable. Let's see. John Baker probably was the same man who made the quilts of fustian for Princess Elizabeth in 1609. As an upholsterer to the royal household, a later workman, John Casbert, in 1674, made for his Mat's Closet Whitehall a chair of sky-colored damask, being round in the back and quilted with a bag of down, with borders and elbows stuffed with 2 stools suitable. So that sounds like it's a chair with some light blue fancy damask and a bag of down would be, I mean, like a goose down. Oh, interesting. So when you look for how it's woven, you get results for chambray. I wonder if there's a connection there, or if Google's just being dumb. The linings of coffers and cabinets in which clothes were kept, especially women's garments, were lined with quilted silk and stuffed with scented padding. No doubt the reason for this was that many clothes were unwashable due to the lavish embroidery and the ornament with which they were decorated. Yeah, you can't wash a thing that's covered with you can't really wash silk anyway very well. And if it's got all kinds of encrusting and precious metal threads and all that stuff, you can't wash that. In 1673, Richard Pigg, I love that, his last name's Pigg, charged £25 for a large cabinet with 9 drawers covered with turkey leather. I'm assuming that would be leather from Turkey, not leather made from a turkey. Lined with sarcenet and quilted with perfumes, with 10 locks and garnished with gilt nails. In this case, the nails mentioned had gilt heads and were used as a decoration on the outside of the cabinet. The nails used for the inside quilting probably were covered with sarcenet to match the lining. Wow. So that is some type of chest that, was like very lavish. Very, very, like, you're not going to find that at IKEA. In 1676, Ye Lady Beeling had to pay £10 for a cabinet with several drawers covered with Russian leather and lined with sarcenet and quilted with gilt nails. Ye locks and handles of the best sort with a twisted frame and a leather case. The linings of some coaches were also upholstered with leather or silk, quilted with covered nails. By the end of the 1660s, in spite of the fashion for quilted garments and headwear, it was the bed quilt which was of most importance, and once more we find quilting being considered in its effect upon health. This time it was by John Locke, who was concerned with the correct upbringing of a child. Oh, God. John Locke, I think CPS might want to look into you. So this is what he says for the upbringing of a child. Let his bed be hard, and rather quilts than feathers. So just a quilt, no feather bed. No softness, just the quilt. On your hard... yes, mind your beeswax. Just lay down on this hard bed. Whereas being buried every night in feathers melts and dissolves the body, is often the cause of weakness and the forerunner of an early grave. So do not let your children be warm or comfortable when they sleep. But for those who have survived the dangers of this softness in their youth, the colorful materials and embroidery of the imported quilts were in welcome contrast to the period during the middle of the century when extravagance of any sort was under a cloud, and in consequence, the demand for them continued. With this rise in the demand and their popularity, it was only to be expected that the prices would rise too. Some burdocks, yes. And, some used nails. Just anything to keep your children from being comfortable. The days of being able to purchase a pair of quilts for £5 or £6 were over. And in the expense book of John Hervey, the first Earl of Bristol, the cost of one quilt showed how much the price for them had risen. On the 30th of August, 1689, paid Mary Bishop for ye use and by order of Mrs. Jane Harrison for an India quilt for a bed, £38. And that is the end of the 17th century. So John Locke has children lying in the worst type of situation for their sleep. And we've got a lot of concern about whether you should wear a quilted hat or not. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was something else. On Monday, we will get to the 18th century, right? And I'll have to look and see how long that chapter is, whether we just do that century or get 19th in there too. I suspect the 19th century is going to be a long one, though. So, yeah, it is Friday Eve. So do you think lice was an issue? That is an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking, so like the coifs that they wore were just like little, like either a skull cap or like a little thing that, would just tie under your chin. And those were made of like a very thin, like linen. And that went under your other headwear. So women that were wearing, stuff would have had like something else over that, they call it a veil, but it's just literally like a napkin over your head. I don't know how else to describe it. But I could see like body lice, head lice being something that could stay in the divots of quilting and also in like anything that was knitted. So, that is certainly something that, yeah, the things they thought were good for all. I know. It's insane when you read this stuff. But then again, think about, oh my gosh, think about today. Think about this. I mean, and I don't want to get into the debates, but anti-vaxxers, the weird things that they thought, but we have the same weird thoughts today that are just crazy. The past truly was disgusting, but I would say they did not smell terribly as you think they might. People obviously had BO because they did not wear they did not wear antiperspirant, but they actually did. They spent a lot of time cleaning their bed linens and their body clothing. So maybe not the gorgeous like dresses and jackets and things, but they did frequently launder the garments that were close to their body. So like those long shirts. So while their skin may not have been squeaky clean, they did spend a lot of time in laundering the stuff that touched their body. And what some modern experimental archaeologists have done is to figure out, like, if I don't take a bath for a year, but I always put clean clothes on every day, how bad am I going to stink? And the truth is, clean clothes on a dirty body don't smell as bad as dirty clothes on a clean body. So, yeah, there's the stench of years previous may not have been as bad as we think it was. And I think, think about the stench of today, like a Febreze plug-in is probably very overwhelming to a person of the 17th century. Or car exhaust. I mean, I can imagine somebody coming from, centuries ago and being like, oh my gosh, how do you live with this? Right? Their breath, yeah, was probably gross. Chimney soot, yeah. All right, you guys, I am going to skedaddle. Unfortunately, today is a day of more back-to-back calls after this. So, the beginning of the year is like that. It's like, weren't the holidays hard enough that we don't need to be slammed with stuff on the 4th day of the new year? Thank you, Kellen. Thank you very much. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend, and I will be back on Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And I hope also that you would be able to join us on Tuesday night, which is at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Jill and I are doing our book club, and that streams through Instagram. So definitely reach out if you have questions about how to get there and do that. But otherwise, I hope to see you guys on Monday, and have a wonderful weekend. Mwah! Take care.